Hey, wonderful people. How's it going? We're back live. Woo! Day 47. Quarantine. We're talking about web performance. Hello again. I am Justin Ribeiro. I hope you're all doing well out there and feeling this ongoing, pandemic the best you can. I know we're all trying real hard. And today we're going to talk about lighthouses. Because lighthouses, they're that beacon on the corner of a mountain or a shoreline. Probably not a mountain. Why would you have a lighthouse on a mountain? Did I mention it's day 47? It's day 47. So today we are going to talk about Lighthouse. I'm going to keep clicking the view until I find the right view. There it is. We did it. Lighthouse. Who am I? Justin Ribeiro. Still the EVP. 4 episodes in. If you're looking for our previous live chats and trainings regarding web performance, do look down in the description below here at YouTube. We've got all the descriptions, all the links. I am the web platform engineering person over at this.labs. You can follow me on Twitter, Justin Ribeiro. And in case you are new to our Hangout O Things, do you find keeping up with the constantly evolving technologies is a struggle? Do you want to bring your team up to speed on one of the latest technologies? Hey, This.labs offers personalized training programs to suit your organizational needs, ensuring you and your company stay on the leading edge. Contact us today at hi@this.co to set up your complimentary needs assessment. Normally, this is where the jingle would be at the end of the thing, but I don't have a jingle. I have no soundboard. I feel like this stream could use a soundboard. Maybe next week. We'll dig one out of the old closet of things. Sponsoring this week, This.labs. Again, you can follow us on Twitter at This.labs for all your technology needs. And again, our sponsor this week, Hey Coffee, because I have more pictures of coffee. This of my oldest child, Allison. Yeah, she was about 8 right there. And yeah, that's a latte, because you start them young. You start them young on the coffee journey. Yeah, you thought I was just going to show you pictures of coffee. No, my kids drink coffee. I got twins downstairs who started drinking coffee when they were 2. And at this point, it's the only thing keeping us going. So, hey, we're talking about Lighthouse this week, and not just Lighthouse in DevTools, not just Lighthouse in Chrome. We're going to go beyond. We're going to go beyond the beyond about all the wonderful things and places you can put Lighthouse, because I pretty much put it everywhere in various means. But before we sort of go into the wonderfulness of Lighthouse, I feel like there's a 90s pop song reference I'm just not missing right now. It'll come to me. It'll come to me. Last week, we talked about a series of general things that we like to keep in mind when we're thinking about performance. And I like to revisit them at the beginning of every one of these streams and every one of our trainings, because at the end of the day, these things are important to help understand the very nature of how your performance testing should go. And number 1, perf is relative. What's fast for you may not be fast for your end user. You have a workstation. Workstations are not in your pocket, contrary to popular belief. That phone, that's not to say that, your phone might not be very powerful. I mean, my daughter's phone the other day was very powerful in the fact that it just about melted, because that's how bad some web performance is out there. And that made me sad. So, hey, remember, just because it's fast for you is not fast for everyone. Test on what your users are testing on. And performance is a lot about perception. Loading times being equal does not necessarily mean all things are good. That does not necessarily mean you're having a fast paint experience. Doesn't mean that your users are having the exact same experience. That doesn't look like it's just there, right? You get that, oh, well, it loaded very quickly. Well, what loaded exactly? A blank white screen? Not exactly the sort of thing we want to give our end users, unless at this point you're somebody's site out there who's just not handling the current ongoing escalation of scale. And number 3, perf is about reduction. When in doubt, ship less things. Ship less JavaScript. Write less JavaScript. Write more succinct JavaScript. Just write less. Ship less on the wire. Be cognizant that these things are not free. The thread is not free. We don't get free render time. We have to compete for resources on the web, just like everybody else. So ship less things. Make your users happy. So We're talking about web performance today. We're talking about Lighthouse. Oh my. So if you followed the stream in our previous sessions, I reference Lighthouse a lot. The reporting in it in DevTools is quite nice. It's a nice little button for all your button needs. Right there as the audits tab, which will be shortly be renamed the Lighthouse tab in DevTools in subsequent versions of Chrome. But Lighthouse has a lot of power under the hood, and a lot of that power is not directly in DevTools, oddly enough. Utilizes DevTools, but we can use Lighthouse a lot of different ways. So we're going to diverge. We're going to go off the beaten path down the merry old way to find exactly how you might be able to start using Lighthouse in a way that works for your workflow, because Lighthouse, you see, is a very extensible sort of thing. So let's go and share some more stuff. Hoping I don't close this window. Oh, I just messed that up. That's all right. We're going to share that one instead. Boop, boop, boop. Hey, a big, ginormous console window. Yay for us. So one of the big things that you can do is that you can install Lighthouse on the command line. So if you're wary of the command line experience, fear not. The command line is not as scary as it seems to be. Let's make this a little bit bigger so we can see it. Boop. There we go. Okay, so when we're talking about Lighthouse, DevTools is great. You can do a lot of things with it, but we can actually run Lighthouse straight on our command line. We can sit there and run Lighthouse help. It'll give us a whole bunch of flags that look very scary. Oh, throttling upload throughput kbps. What in the world is that? Do not panic. It's going to be all right. All right, so you got all this stuff, and you're like, Justin, I really just kind of want to run a test. Like, can I run this test and have a nice day? And the reality is that you can. And the way to do this is that you can just say, hey, I want to run this test against my particular domain, whether that be something local to your machine or something on the remote side. And again, we're going to pick on my site because I'm an easy target. So my particular setup of Lighthouse, I have two variations of Lighthouse. I have the stable version. I have the next version. So I'm going to run the stable version first. We're going to take a look at that. So I have a alias for this, Lighthouse stable, and we're just going to run it to see what it does. So you can fire this up. You can install this with npm straight away on your desktop platform of choice. It'll run on Windows, Mac, Linux. I'm running it on Linux here. And at the end of the day, it'll run through and do all this stuff. Here you can tell it, oh, good, you've gone ahead and written to this report file. So in this case, we've got a little report here. So if we go and we open this report, boop, boop, open the report. Maybe I should have opened one previously. That would have been faster. And if we look at that report, we get a report that looks like it's very similar to what we would experience in DevTools. So if you've run Lighthouse through DevTools before, fundamentally, you're not going to see much different here. And you're going, Justin, I could just do this in DevTools, like whatever. Like, what value does this give me? And fundamentally, the HTML report may not be the simplest way to get something out of it, but you can actually output other things from Lighthouse to sort of experience and to sort of move around and operate against. So let us go back to the magic of Justin's very unscaled screen. Okay, so one thing we can do straight away is we could say, well, you know what, I really don't want, like, I don't want the HTML. Like, can I have can I have something else? Like, what if I wanted to go through and like dig some keys out of it? So, well, we could say, I can go ahead and just say, let's run our JSON. Let's give me a Lighthouse run with some JSON in it instead of the HTML, because maybe we want the JSON to be able to operate against, or maybe we want to send that around as something that somebody else could see and use against. So we can say live stream run. Gonna name it. It's going to run forth. It's going to fire up Chrome, which in this case is the headless variant because I've got it running headless at the moment. But normally it would just pop Chrome. This is a little easier to handle in the live stream. It goes ahead and runs that thing. So if we look at live stream, actually, if we just do a cat live stream, a whole bunch of JSON. Yay for us. Boy, Justin, that looks unwieldy. Indeed, pretty unwieldy. But there's another nifty little tool that we can use that is called the Lighthouse Report Viewer. So let's share this. So let's say you've got some JSON from maybe it was a single artifact run or some other set of artifacts you want. This is a little Lighthouse viewer right here. It's available through the Google Chrome Lighthouse repo as a viewer. It's under their GitHub account through the CLI. We'll put it in the notes below. But you can drag or drop or copy and paste a particular JSON file. So we can go and grab our live stream run and actually open that file and that JSON. And we get all the normal stuff that we would have. We can even toggle the dark theme. Ooh, spooky. And again, you're going to see, well, Justin, those look roughly to be the same numbers. And reasonably speaking, roughly about the same. So we get this nice little JSON file that we can operate against. But you're like, well, Justin, what do I really want the JSON file for, right? And the reality is that the JSON file can be very helpful because if it outputs JSON, then you can actually, well, maybe I can get some stuff out of that I particularly want that's important to me. So one of the things that we can do is we can pump it. So open the screen. So now we're going to go a little deeper. You're saying, well, what's the JSON do for me exactly? Well, what the JSON can do for us is that we can output JSON straight away such that we can pipe it. So one of the things that I like to do is that when I'm trying to find like a particular notion of a thing that might be important to me, so in this case, we're going to pretend it's first meaningful paint. We can run Lighthouse quietly, if we so please, with this little quiet flag that's hanging out right here. We can say, you know what, don't run the entire stack, just run me the performance segment of things, because we have presets within the stack of available configuration stacks. So a common preset would be the one you're going to run in a normal run is full, right? You're going to get a full stack of performance testing. But we can actually just say, yo, just run me the perf so that I can get this audit. Or I could just run XYZ other preset. Similarly speaking, you can actually feed it to your own presets if you want, which is part of the customization. We'll dive into it a little later. So what exactly does this crazy command do? So we can see the Lighthouse command right here. We can see that I'm running the stable variant. I'm quietly going to run it, so I'm not going to get any console output. Only perf, going to output JSON. I'm going to pipe right here, and I'm going to push it into JQ. So if you're not familiar with JQ is a really nifty little command line JSON processor. So you can pipe stuff into JQ. It's really, really fast. I use it for many things. And in this case, we're going to use some of JQ's more advanced features to say, you know what, I'm going to actually check some of the JSON that comes back because I know that I'm going to look for my audits. I'm going to look for my first meaningful paint key within this segment of data. And I'm actually going to look for the score. I'm going to look, hey, if I'm less than 0.9, which in this case would be a 90% score or 90 score, I'm going to fail. Otherwise, you know what? FMP looks good. I can successfully do this and run. At which point, I'm going to clean this up a little bit with TR, just for the sake of the output of this, which will be really interesting because I have no idea how it's going to run on this machine. So let's find out. So immediately as I hit enter, you will quickly notice that I'm not getting all the same console output that I normally get. So behind the scenes, Lighthouse is running to go give me this thing so I can pipe my JSON down into the path that I want it to go. And as it runs this, eventually it comes back. And so now we see this little success message. Success, FMP looks good, with the actual score that it had. So in this case, it was 1, so 100. And this is a nifty little trick that I use in a lot of different places. So you can use the JSON output from Lighthouse directly from the CLI tool without actually having to use anything else. Like you can use this in a number of ways. One way that I used it previously was as part of VS Code's tasks. So if you have a whole bunch of tooling that a common set of developers are running against and you know what your deployment target is, or if you want to test something very, very particular about the very nature of your site that may be running locally, you can do that. So we can look at this. Wrong tab. Wrong tab. So many tabs. Probably didn't want to close that. Oh, it was just the viewer. Okay, we can close the viewer. And apparently I don't have this open. So let's go to and maybe I don't have it on this one. Maybe it is. Boop. Boop, boop. Oh, copy and pasting is hard, internet. Pasting go. So one way you can do this is via VS Code. You can write tasks. So tasks are a nifty little feature within VS Code. You can do this in any number of editors. And in my case, I simply wrote a series of Docker-based CLI grabbers that use a very similar technique to this, where I'm looking for really particular timings. I'm looking for first interactive, things of that nature. And again, there's no real code to write here. Really, what you're only doing is manipulating the nature of what the output from Lighthouse comes out as. So you don't have to run the full subset of tests. If you want, you can also just pull out accessibility or any other piece that you need. And you can parse that JSON. Like those keys are there for our sort of useful needs. So VS Code is one way to do this straight away. The other portion of this that you can use is that if you need more information, you can actually get a lot more information actually out of a Lighthouse run. So normally we're looking at the reports, or in this case, we're yanking the JSON out so that we can run, some command that is going to sit there and reparse our values for us. All that stuff might make sense in the context of, something we may want to look at directly. But realistically, maybe we want more. Maybe we want the trace. In which case, well, how does one get the actual trace out of Lighthouse? And the way we do that is that we actually save assets. So we can save the artifact stack from Lighthouse on the command line to actually see more and operate more against it. So I'm going to quickly do this. Boop. And here we can see again, very common Lighthouse command. We're going to test against the same site. We're going to put an output path for assets, and we're going to use this double dash, save assets. And in this case, it's going to fire up, run a whole bunch of stuff, do our usual song and dance of performance testing. It's going to error out, apparently, because sure, why not? But immediately here, you can see that instead of just saving the HTML report, we actually have a new set of saves. We can actually see that we're saving a DevTools log. We're saving the base trace as well. within assets. So this trace, it's even more complicated than the last one, right? Because it's a DevTools trace. So we're getting a whole bunch of additional information that we may find useful. Um, trace. And what we can do is that we can use that for the we can use that within the DevTools timeline viewer. So you can load these up in DevTools straight. You can use the online variant in the Chrome DevTools GitHub repository, which we'll put in the link below. And at that point, you can sit there and go, oh, well, I know what exactly this trace saw, not just the end result scoring that Lighthouse gives us. So now we have the, a listing of additional assets that we can use straight away. Similarly speaking, if you're saying, well, that's nifty, Justin, like, oh, I could get, some assets out of this, and I could use that to, verify my trace and see what maybe a hot method is. If you watched last week's episode of our training ode du jour of web performance things, you will note that we sort of looked at the nature of what traces give you. So you can use a really particular trace run to dig deep into a problem other than just looking at a base score. So this is a really good way to get more information out of Lighthouse without actually having to do a lot of like, well, I can't duplicate that run. Well, here's the assets, here's the artifacts. I can actually use those straight away. Similarly speaking, you can actually pull the entire subsegment of Lighthouse's lifecycle out through what's called the gathering and audit modes. So we can again run this basically with G&A flags. So again, this is not necessarily the most common thing you might do. If you want everything that sort of went on behind the scenes within it, the GA is a good way to go. This will collect a significant stack more of artifacts of things. So if we look at latest run, you'll note now that we actually have this folder because by default, artifacts will generate latest run as your folder. You can name it if you wish by using -GA equals whatever your folder name is. By default, it'll put it in latest run. So you can see we get actually a whole bunch more stuff. So we get the artifacts run, the offline pass that happened, does the redirects check to see what our DevTools log was, default trace. So you do get the trace out of that. So all these things collected, again, give us more opportunity to go through and say, oh, well, we can, utilize this stuff straight away. So this is the skimmed surface variant of things you can do with the Lighthouse command line. My favorite by far is pumping through JQ, because if I'm looking for a really particular number and I know I can read the JSON out of it because the keys are fairly clean, you can sit there and grab all that stuff out. Similarly speaking, if you need to do throttling or anything of that nature, you can turn these things on and tweak them a little bit. I generally use it through the base throttling that happens through the mobile profile. And technically, if you wanted to, you could target the port of an actual device that's in DevTools mode. So by default, normally you're running against 92222. So if we look at yeah, I don't have it against this one because I have an internal one. But normally you could run your own variation where you're saying, you know what, go target my device, whatever port you've got it running on. By default, that's always going to be 92222. You can define it within your device or Chrome or in DevTools. It's very configurable. So beyond that, you can sit there and say, well, Justin, that's all great, fine and dandy. I can run this on the command line. But, what else could I potentially do with this? And the reality is that not only is there the command line variant of things, there's also the, hey, I can actually just integrate and write stuff for Lighthouse via like Node. So one of the things that I like to do, because, I'm a crazy cat out there just thinking to himself, you know what? I bet I could automate and test some things and make my lighthouse experience just a wee bit better. And one way to do that is to actually call and run Lighthouse through Node. One example of this that I have is Mocha and Jest. So you're testing stuff and you're feeling like, you know what, I really want to I really want to experience, this on when I run my unit tests and things. And I can do this straight away with ingest and whatnot, with just a little help. So if we dig into the very nature of a run. So here we're sitting in GitHub. We're hanging out in the Lighthouse Jest example, which is under my GitHub account. It's also linked in the Lighthouse documentation if you just want to click from it there. This one basically says, well, hey, I can actually launch and run Lighthouse straight away. Oh, slow. So I can go ahead and run this straight away through my little helper. So if we hang a left and head on back here to the helper land of things, how exactly am I doing that? So in this case, I'm actually hooking into Puppeteer and requiring Lighthouse. In this case, I've defined a whole bunch of network params. These are basically straight out of web page test, which we'll talk about here in a sec. That give us a very realistic-ish sort of way to do it. Throttling in DevTools as a whole is very hard. There's an entire document about this in the Lighthouse repo. It's definitely worth a read if you're trying to get that real-world experience. We're not going to go over the entire thing now. We could spend a week talking about it. But under the hood, this is one way you can do it. You can technically use the Chrome launcher straight away. This method lets me push emulated network conditions down into it. And in this case, we're firing up Puppeteer. We're saying, hey, you're going to run this headless. I'm going to disable GPU to make our life a little bit easier. We're going to send down some network emulation conditions. And we're going to actually just run Lighthouse. Like Lighthouse is actually just this method. You say, hey, here's my URL. Here's my options and my config. Give me some results. At which point then we can use those results and do whatever we want to test with. So again, the results are very similar to our JSON output, but now they're in a nice little convenient package that we've just ran in Node that we can actually just go and test against. And in this case, if we go back to our performance test, and in this case, we'll look at the 4G one, we can see that I've set up some Lighthouse options that look very similar to the baseline sort of flags you would find within the CLI. So you're going, oh, these look kind of familiar to me. There's a few differences. Connection, for instance, which is just sort of my way to make these run against my sort of stuff. You can also see I'm only asking for the categories of performance. Like I'm not asking for the entire kit and caboodle. And you can see that, hey, I'm going to launch this. I'm going to run this with my Lighthouse config I've got up here, and I'm going to pull the Lighthouse result straight out. At which point you'll quickly notice, oh, hey, I can actually just run expecs straight against those tests and audit those things straight away. You can run this. I noticed a question in the chat. You can run Lighthouse against as many sites as you want. There's nothing preventing you from doing that, but you do have to chain them in whichever method you want. So in this case, the base URL is here. So in this case, I've defined this URL to be audited against whatever this is. Normally, when you're doing this across a wide range of sites to find things, there are different ways to do this. One is that you can write your own sort of report system that'll take this. There is an example of this actually in the Chrome GitHub repository right now that'll let you collect against a set of URLs. A number of services that utilize Lighthouse also let you define sets of URLs to audit on whatever cycle you want to audit on. You can similarly do this against some of the other actionable stuff. So whether that's Lighthouse's CI, subsystem, which is available now, which we'll look at here in a sec, as well as like the GitHub Action stuff. So I have a GitHub Action. Quite a few people have a GitHub Action now that do various things they wanted to do, which we'll also take a look at. Under the hood, though, there's nothing preventing you from saying, oh, you know what, settings wise, I want to grab all those categories and actually just run against, my accessibility or, some other particular target. I have a tendency to focus on timings a lot. So one of the cool things is that if you've ever used custom user timings through the platform API that we have, those actually surface in Lighthouse too. So if you're looking and going, oh, I got to pull that out of the trace, actually you can just call the audits for user timings and go, hey, for my particular set of things, give me the time error that I set for your user timing, whatever that start time was. So you get high resolution DOM timers here too. So you can actually go, oh, this did meet my criteria for my custom timer. This is super powerful when you know exactly things you want to test, as opposed to just generics. So the generic stuff can be a little bit harsh, depending on what your run is, as we'll see here in a second. But at the end of the day, the really nice thing is that it's fully programmable for you. So you can write your own tooling around this. You don't have to rely either on the base version that's in DevTools or the base CLI. You can decide how you want to run Lighthouse against how many times you want to run it, and what you want to sort of collect all those things to be. From a local test side, this can be a little bit deceiving too, right? You're on localhost, it's going to be throttled out. Is it going to be like the true experience that a user is going to see? And the answer to that is probably no. Again, emulation is not 100%. Emulation is a good start point, but generally speaking, if you've got actual devices, you want to run against actual devices. And if you've got remote stack stuff that operates like it does in your prod environments, you should be testing against those. So we use staging a lot, which is basically a one-to-one representation for most of the clients that I work with. They all have staging. They are all basically mocked environments from the baseline compositions of their running environments. So they run pretty much one-to-one in most cases, which means you get a really clean test against Lighthouse, be it whether you've written something custom like this or you're running against a device lab setup. So you can get a long way with integrating straight through Lighthouse. The node variation, there's stacks of tools for this. Some of them also CLI tools, but a lot of it comes down to where do you want to actually start testing performance. Just as one example of that, the Mocha example as well, which I have lying around, which is a little dated at this point. Someone wrote a newer version. It's also in the Lighthouse list of repositories and stuff. The other side of this too is that you don't have to run it local to your setup. So a lot of this stuff runs against containers in most cases, in some form or fashion for most folks. I have a container that does this as well. Most of the stuff you see me run here locally runs against the two variations of this in combination, usually with my Chrome container. So the Chrome headless container in combination with that lets you deploy in a lot of places. You can use these things straight. You can use them in things like Travis or Circle CI or other places. There are variations of these that are in the Lighthouse and Chrome repos as well. So you can run them however you want. You're not contained to only your local test environment that is, written for your case. You can deploy wherever you want. Another segment of this too is that, well, Justin, I've written this thing, but hey, where am I going to actually, collect and run these things? Like I can run them locally, sure, but maybe I want to run them on every PR or every other thing of that nature. And one easy way to do that now is with GitHub Actions. So again, we can take the node variation here, much to our contentness of running Jest, of which we could just run these tests straight. Hey, integrate and go. But we can actually just run a we can just run a GitHub example action straight away. And again, we're going to pick on old mystical blog PWA. Boop. So one thing about Lighthouses is that you really truly can put it wherever you want. You can run it in containers. You can run it in your CIs. You can have it output the artifacts you need. You can have it bind into GitHub or wherever your source control is. This is a key thing that makes Lighthouse particularly powerful, as opposed to just running it through DevTools or just running it through web.dev or one of those places, is that you can automate where you want it to go. So in my case, I automated on PR requests all the time. Where I'm particularly looking for my budgets, I'm looking for my paint timings. And again, this is all just a Lighthouse action that you can go and grab. And again, mine uses WPT network emulation profiles. Other ones use the standard tooling straight away. And again, you can have it test any matter of stuff that you want. So if you've got accessibility or anything else on the SEO side, all that stuff that you have, it's available within that report, just how much you want to go into. And a question I actually get a lot is, hey, Justin, why does your thing not actually just grab my repository and run stuff? The reality is that you want that real experience. You want to try to be as real as you can into prod all the time. And in my case, this comes down to, I want to do a deploy. So my Lighthouse action doesn't actually run against your base repo. You need to deploy and tell Lighthouse the action, hey, do some stuff for me. Because under the hood, it's going to fire up Chrome. Here you can see that instead of using pure Puppeteer, it actually uses Chrome Launcher in this variation. In this case, again, I'm running silent with a headless. I am looking basically for a container within this subset. And I'm going to fire up with all my network latency straight away. And again, running it through Launcher at this point is slightly easier in most of the GitHub example, or in most of the GitHub action subset. At least that's what I've found. Checks wise, again, you're operating against items that come out of Lighthouse. So you can say, hey, give me the scoring budget for this. Make sure I can check against these things. Go find me my keys against my audit. So if I have particular budget items I want, I can loop through these. And again, this is sort of shows you the overall experience that you can have with Lighthouse when you start building your own tools. Is that if you have particular budget items or things that you're looking for, don't be afraid to just go, you know what, I can go pull the audits and set my own keys and go get that information. Lighthouse does not constrain you. You can run your own config straight. You can pump data into it. You can look at categories as a whole. Like, you don't have to look at just pure audits. Like, if you want the categorical score of those things, pull the categorical score. Again, it's all within there for your runs for these things. And in our case, we've got some fancy GitHub action here to actually fail stuff for us. So if we want to fail things, we can do that straight. We actually don't have to go and wait for it. Everyone's action's a little bit different, but again, this goes to the fact that if you think Lighthouse is only about the CLI, it's not. You can extend and really push the limit of what you want to check. Similarly speaking, Lighthouse integrates at a deeper level across a much wider land of infrastructure. So one of the things that most people don't know is that you can actually run it on against web page test. So I'm probably in the minority. I have a little web page test device lab in my closet. Because who doesn't want to run a tiny rack in their home during a quarantine? You gotta love live device testing. But alas, you don't have to wait to set up your own home lab. You can actually run this stuff straight. You can actually gen Lighthouse in web page test against a device that's there right now. So you actually don't have to wait around for this. We can open up the Lighthouse report score straight away, and we can scroll down here to the bottom and go, oh, this was actually running on a G4. And it was using provided network throttling, which basically uses saying, I'm using the device. This is a little tricky underneath the hood of WPT, which we're not going to get into, but it's really nifty if you want to dive into the fact of like how does one throttle a device? Um, you know, VLANs and FreeBSD, baby. So so you can go forth and say, hey, I'm going to use this network agent, pull this thing out, and you can get a realistic thing against an actual device, against that particular run, as well as a host of other wonderful things that web page test gives you. So if you're thinking again to yourself, well, where can I put Lighthouse? Really, it's the question of where can't you put Lighthouse at this point? Um, the reality is that Lighthouse travels a significant amount further than most people believe. Um, and one should always be looking towards that next sort of thing. So we're going to stop sharing this. So when push comes to shove, you can decide to run Lighthouse realistically three ways, is the way I like to look at it. One is that you can always run it right now locally with what you got. So if you're sitting at your computer, you can sit there and go, you know what, I'm going to run it in DevTools. I'm going to run it maybe through the CLI. Maybe I've installed it via NPM or Yarn, and it's my global little thing, and I use that thing. Two is that you could say, well, you know what, I also need a little bit more than that. I really needed to run in my tests. So now you've decided I'm going to go beyond. I'm going to say I'm going to write a little node. I'm going to hook into the Lighthouse node module, and I'm going to sit there and say, you know what, I can go ahead and I can decide to run that. I'm going to run my custom config. And again, this is not an unknown thing. So if you're unfamiliar with it, you can actually just read the documentation. No one is trying to hide this fact. The configuration documentation is in the Lighthouse repo under docs. So if you want to see other examples of, oh, hey, look, someone's running Lighthouse, you don't have to use all the fancy variation. You can just use a very common sort of setup. Like there's not a lot of code. I'm showing you the random stuff that Justin has built to make things run in a variety of contexts. But getting started with it is actually very simple. It is documented. Have a look. See if you want to write your own custom variation for your tests, or whether or not you want to run your own gatherers, or all the things that you can potentially do, whether that's only looking for CPU idle audits or whatnot. Similarly speaking, is that if you're not running the if you're deciding that you don't want to run that straight, you can decide, hey, you know what, I actually just want to, I would love it if Lighthouse had, just common CI. And the CI side of life is a little bit more complicated, to be certain. You can run Lighthouse CI through the new variation, which is the one I would recommend if you want per commit diffing of what your perf is. So this is available now, hanging out here in the Lighthouse CI repo, which I have hiding right here. So Lighthouse CI, it's under the Google Chrome org on GitHub. I'm not going to run this at the moment because this takes a while to fire up, even in my tiny rack of things. But realistically, you get the experience of, you know what, I can compare between two diffs and see exactly at a deeper level of introspection what my set of audits or things that are important to me on a per commit basis might be. This can get pretty fine grained, and it may be overkill to start with, depending on who you talk to. I'm of the opinion that if you have infrastructure that requires consistent monitoring of the way code works, Lighthouse CI is the way to go. You can install it as a GitHub app as well. It can run standalone on your actual repository. There is a little GitHub action right here and a CR starter example pack too. So when in doubt, do look at the related projects, both in the Lighthouse repo, Lighthouse CI repo, and my repos. Like we all point to roughly the same set of documentation, because that documentation is really good. Use it to your advantage. Beyond this, you can hook into Lighthouse CI and Travis and all those other things too, just by running standard tools. And I realize I'm running up against time. Oh, there's so many things that Lighthouse can do. So this has been the run and gun variation of talking about Lighthouse. The third thing you always want to do if you're not in the I want to run a local, or if you're not in the I want to write my node thing, is definitely run the basically hosted pack stuff. So if you don't want to set up Node or run your own CI or that sort of thing, there are many services out there that will run will run Lighthouse for you in sort of a stack of ways, some of which cost more money than others. But you can use these to monitor large scales of URLs as well as origins. So not just local to me. So the one problem that you have with running local and with running even in CI states is that where your users are. So if you have users on the other side of the world and you're going, their experience is not quite the same as mine, even throttled and all that, the RTT seems very long. Because alas, in the web performance world, we cannot beat the speed of light. Packets still have to travel, and you need to be able to test those things from those spots. So if you've got edge serving and everything else, and you find that that's not giving you the performance that you're wanting to get, you're going to want to run Lighthouse in different parts of the world. So tools like Calibre, or Speed Curve, which will let you not only collect but run data sets. Trio.sh as well. They've got a new product that's on top of Lighthouse CI that's really nifty. All these things that let you instantly fire up all this infrastructure, start running hosts of test URLs on any basis you want. And again, it just depends on which one of those three levels you want to be at. This is sort of the very nature of Lighthouse, is that it's flexible enough to fit the bill so that no matter what your skill level is, you can get there. Start simple. Start running them in DevTools. If you're not running them right now, do so. Pop a site up. Take me to task on one of my sites. Look at one of my examples on GitHub or on that I've got randomly thrown around. Run me a trace and go, Justin, your thing is terrible. Then we'll look at it and have fun with it. But at the end of the day, be willing to take the hard look and continuously sort of always be running Lighthouse. Boop. Where are my slides? Slides. So, if you found the fact that we just ran around and looked at about 35 million things that you could do with Lighthouse in the span of 45 minutes, do be aware that, hey, we do have corporate training available and we can do it remote now. I know that the pandemic has been very hard on everyone. I hope you're all staying safe out there. But if you need help, this dot is there to help. Do send us an email at hi@thisdot.co to set up your complimentary needs assessment. And, we can trace some sites if you want. I love tracing sites. I live in DevTools. So, hey, let's do that. And hey, I can run some Docker or some Lighthouse traces through Docker for you too, if you like. Ooh, excitement. So, if you need to find me, you can. Hi, kid. You can find me on Twitter at Justin Ribeiro. Send me your notes and whatnot if you've got questions. I will try to keep up. I'm slightly behind on my correspondence, but hopefully you find this interesting. If you're looking for the previous episodes, do check the links below in our description down yonder. I find it really strange right now, by the way, that there's two pictures of me on the screen. There's one over there. I'm all, moody and black and white, which my oldest daughter took. Well done, Allie. And I'm just over here, feeling the vibe and the sunshine. But realistically, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. And do tune in next week when we talk more things web performance, more things Lighthouse, more things DevTools. We will trace all the things. We will make the web platform and your wonderful sites just a little bit faster. So tune in next week, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Like and subscribe down below, because my kids otherwise will, I have kids. They're watching now. Have a good one, everybody.